Hi guys. So one quick thing, and I'm going to mention this in an email in a minute. Please, even though you're not in the other class, please watch the other two videos as well, because I'm going to be talking about many of the same issues, and I think it would help you, and that'll allow me to speed through this video a little bit faster. Um, the primary thing I think all of you guys are still struggling with, and I'm putting together a slideshow right now as we speak to address some of this, is you guys are still having a really hard time with simplification and with drawing with masses. So for instance, Rodney, in this drawing, you've got a whole kind of a smattering of different tones, and the drawing isn't simplifying well. And I'll show you what I mean when I show you this slideshow on Wednesday. But that would be the number one thing. And also, as I said, watch some of the other videos too to get a feel for it. The main thing is just there's so many values that we can't really tell what's in shadow, what's in the light, what's a local value contrast, what isn't, and that's causing a lot of problems. Okay, so I'm gonna go through these fairly quick. Same thing on this one in a sense. This one you're getting a better separation of light and shadow, but a lot of the shadow tones aren't reading as shadow tones because we've got dark areas like this. That's reading as a shadow tone, which makes these things read almost as light. So you need more separation between your light and your shadow tones. If you're going to have a dark area, then the shadows need to kind of all stick in that same realm. All right. With this one here, this one's a little bit better, but again, it's a little more simplified. But even in this kind of stuff, let this stuff drop away. Okay, so if I have a dark like that, that's my shadow tones. Let everything kind of go towards that. So try not to go dark in only one area. What it does is it makes these tones look uncomfortably close to your light tones. And I should say that that's a really common problem. Okay, excuse me. So Bellin, with this one, not bad. You're using the tone a little bit more effectively, but yeah, it's just a little. I'm not quite understanding things like why is this dark and this isn't dark. That doesn't make sense to me from any lighting standpoint. Or why are these areas dark but not these? So it feels a little bit arbitrary, and I'm not really reading the sketch very well. Now, when I look at one like this, it's really kind of the same issues. Like, how does this stay light over here and stay light over here while all these things are appearing dark? That makes me think that it's local values you're looking at rather than shadow tones. Or how do you have a small dark area here, but then this area here, which is also on the overhang or underneath it, that is not getting dark. That doesn't make much sense. Okay, Christian, with one like this, I like the fact that you're trying to simplify it. But your hatching is becoming kind of distracting to the point where it's making it hard to see what's what. Don't know what else to say about that, except it's a little bit active. Again, I think some of this will be made more clear on Wednesday when I show you some other examples and discuss them in class. With this one, it's really more of a line drawing. Yeah, technically there's tone there, but the contrast is so light on the tones they're not really reading as any kind of tone. So it's really just kind of a line drawing. It needs more value contrast. Same thing on this one, Derek. You're really doing a line drawing that you're putting some arbitrary tone into. You need to let the tone do more of the work. Same thing on this one. And really the same kind of thing on this one. You guys really are still not quite letting the tone do what it can for you. So you need to start trusting it more. Now, Sarah, in this one, it looks like you're trying to trust it in that way, but then your forms are kind of going all to hell. And I mean that. I don't mean that in the dismissive way that it might sound. It's things like this, like going across these staircases. That still needs to be drawn accurately, because if it's not drawn accurately, it just won't work. Yeah, you want to draw it fast and efficiently, but it's got to still be accurate. Also, I'm not quite understanding why there's so much light here when these areas are so dark. Again, it makes me think it's a local value issue, and that's not what we want. Okay, Anthony, with this one, again, the tones, as with some of the other ones, the tones seem awfully arbitrary. They're not really they seem like kind of stand-ins for local values, like, okay, green grass and cement, but I'm not, but it's not really reading very well. I'm assuming the shadows are the light's coming from this side because these things are in shadow, but then again, these things aren't really feeling like they're in shadow. So you need to separate those tones more. Same thing on this one, and you guys got to slow down. You got to draw the stuff more accurately. That's not going to cut it. You can't do these quick, hurried lines and not check them. It just doesn't fly. You got to spend more time. Same thing on this one. You got to slow down. What you draw, you've got to draw right. You're speeding through this way too fast, Anthony. Okay, Lansing. This is one of the better drawings that I saw from this class. And what I really like about this one, and I want you guys to pay attention to this is one where Lansing is really doing a nice job of making the tone do all the heavy lifting for her. So it's nice and sketchy, but it's still tonal. And so, it's really not, even though it's drawn with line, it's not depending on line for its effects. So it's really a tonal drawing. So Lansing, this one was one of the nicer sketches I saw today. So nice job. This one, Lansing, I think of many of the people in the class, you're understanding how to develop things in tone a little bit better than most people. So again, these are on the right track. They're not all the way there yet. You're still having some problems like with your ellipse down here, stuff like that. But in general, you're doing pretty good. So nice work. Now this one is the only one of yours that I think isn't working, and the main reason is because the shapes are becoming so scattered and so contrasty that it's kind of like it's the visual equivalent sort of an orchestra warming up. You're hearing all this contrast and it's not really resolving into anything you can understand. So areas like this are awfully busy, areas like this are awfully busy, and it's hard for us to reconcile everything. Again, more will be made clear on Wednesday. With these, Bridget, what happened to your tones? Again, it's a line drawing, so I really want to encourage you guys, and I say this in the other video too, I really want to encourage you guys to go outside when you do these sketches. I know it requires some planning and some discomfort sometimes, but you just got to do it. You're going to get better light and shade. You're going to learn a lot faster. With these interior sketches, there's a lot of limitations as to what you can actually learn from them at this point. And on ones like this, the tone is there, but it's rather arbitrary. How is it that this area is dark, or that these areas, like how is this area dark and these frontal things are dark, but this isn't dark? So that makes me think that you're really looking more at local values rather than tones. And a lot of these things, these are white areas. We shouldn't need lines to hold these things together necessarily. I don't mind a few lines, but the main thing, Bridget, is you're still using mostly line to do your work. You got to start leaning more on tone. Okay, now Eric, you're leaning on tones here, and so you're kind of at the next step. But now you're having a hard time making the tones read accurately enough and clearly enough to make sense. So you're kind of in an intermediate stage. But I want you guys to see the difference between, say, these where you're really still line drawings with a couple of tonal shapes. And these were, okay, now you're letting the tone do the work, but the tone isn't doing the right work. So we'll talk about that some more when I come back on Wednesday. Same kind of thing. Again, you're trying to do the right things. It's not quite working for you yet, but we'll talk. Don't worry. Now, this one's my favorite one. This is the one where I think you were really starting to get it. So this one's actually starting to work pretty well. This is kind of what I'm after, you guys, as far as tonal sketching. You're starting to get the hang of it here, Eric. Nice job on this one. Okay, Jessica, nice work on this one. Again, you can use line, but the way that you're doing this, you're actually doing it correctly, where you're developing it. Even things like how you're letting this kind of fade out, that's perfectly fine. There might be a little too much value contrast here, but that's really being kind of nitpicky. Like I would expect this area here to be a little darker, but overall pretty good. Okay, and same thing here. This is a sketch done in line, but the tone and the perspective makes sense. So nice work. This one is probably the least successful one of yours, Jessica. It looks like you either ran out of time or you kind of had a hard time reconciling this area in here. Again, it obviously looks like a shadow, but if it looks like a shadow, it should be closer to these values. Okay, Samantha, not a bad start at all. I like that it's kind of aggressive, and I like that it's kind of loose, but I also like that you're putting in some elements that are showing me you're really looking at this stuff. And that's something a lot of you guys are struggling with, is you're working so quickly and so kind of randomly at times that you're losing some of your actual drawing. And the drawings have to be in there. Now, one thing I would criticize, this is way too much contrast in a shadow area. So those areas should be brought together a little. This one's one of your more successful ones, Samantha. I think this is starting to work. Again, watch out for these value contrasts, though. If these things are in shadow, you may think you're seeing a ton of value contrast, but you're putting in too much. You can simplify those. But pretty good. Also, I like how you're putting in a tree here, but it's not getting symbolic. It's not necessarily correct, but you're taking an honest stab at it. Same thing on this one. This one's very similar to the other one. Again, I like how these marks up here where you're trying to represent these trees are not becoming symbolic marks. They're becoming, you know, kind of simplifications, but that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing, you know, as long as they're well observed. Okay, so on this one, let's see. Hang on, I need to check something here, you guys. Okay. So on this one here, Arturo, this one I think, as I recall, is one of my favorite ones of yours. But the main thing I would have you do is I'd have you squint at this and see that a lot of these areas in here are still not resolving very well when you squint. Now, I'm going to show you what I mean on your next couple, because there it's more obvious. Like when you squint at this one, all these values are basically the same. They're really only separated by, you know, by a very small percentage of value, and so when you squint at it, you just kind of get this blue rectangle. So you need to really watch that. You need to be much more mindful of the value of the tonal ranges and the tonal contrast, and you need to squint more. Same kind of thing on this one. I appreciate your ambition. I think the ambition is good, but you know, okay, I'm getting contrast here and here, but then the drawing is getting kind of, the drawing is sort of going all over the place, and I'm getting way too complex in here. And you know, again, this sky is so bright, or I mean, it's so dark relative to this building. Really, normally there's going to be a lot more value contrast there. You know, you've got this sidewalk about the same value as the sky, and that almost never happens. Now, LT, this one I kind of like. This one's a nice, quick, little efficient sketch, so this is on the right track. Same thing on this one, although you could go in and you could pump up the contrast in a couple of spots to make it read a little bit better. But this is the right idea. Now with this one, actually an interesting contrast, if you look at this one and you look at this one, here he popped up the contrast, but he only popped up the contrast in one area. And so it's, you know, in this area right here. And so it sort of makes the rest of the thing feel flat. You know, so you've got to keep the contrast ranges sort of in the same ballpark so that they work. Okay, Neil, you're really depending more on line on this one than on tone. I mean, look how dark these contrasts are, and then this shadow isn't dark. That's just not right. You've got to have a dark shadow shape. You've got to have more contrast between your lights and your darks and your shadows so that the lines aren't dominating. Again, really a line drawing, you guys. We need tone. Same thing, Neil, and also every building is leaning over. This is like San Jose State a la Pisa. We could be famous if our tower did that. Anyway, I'm poking fun. But yeah, seriously, squint, use more of the tone. Okay, now Luke, you did a really nice job on these. Your drawings aren't sized correctly, so they're not showing the whole screen. But the basic thing you're doing here is correct. I mean, so the rest of the group isn't going to see the full screen view, but you're going about it the right way. I particularly like how you're kind of laying it in, and then you're coming in and spotting your tones. So this is exactly the kind of thing I'm looking for. This one is the same kind of thing, but now your masses are all breaking apart, so they're not solidifying. This one, it's a little bit of that, but it's not as bad as this one. This one, when we squint at it, we're having a hard time resolving things. This one's a little better. This one's kind of in between. Overall, Luke, 3 of the better sketches that I saw today. So particularly that first one. But again, you're just getting too contrasting these things. Simplify them, simplify them, simplify them. You'll see more on Wednesday when I'm saying that. Okay, Jasmine, not bad. A little on the mundane side in the sense that it's not horrible, but it's just not quite as complicated as I'd like to see you guys get. Because there's, when you're drawing something like this, it's a little more modest of a problem, but you're handling it the right way. Now here, as you can see, it got a little bit harder for you. And that's kind of more what I want you to be tackling. Now, if you look at this one, look at the nice contrast you're getting. But again, you're probably using mostly local value contrast. The local values here are dominating the shadows. It should be the inverse of that. Okay, so when you get to this one and you're letting the tone be kind of subordinate, it's not really quite what you want. So let those shadows become more dominant. Here you're doing a better job of it. But now you need to make those shapes more accurate and make them make a little bit more sense. But again, this one, the pattern is better in this one than it is in this one. Okay, Nikki. So Nikki, on this one, again, you're emphasizing the line way too much. Try and let the tone do more of the work. All right. Same thing on this one. And again, oh my God, Nikki, watch these ellipses. They're killing me. Again, line drawing, depend more on the tone. Okay. Now, Satoko, you're doing a nice job of depending on the tone. Now I would say now go to the next step. Now start bringing, you've got these nice flat shadows. Now you can actually start working on the light side. So this is working really well as far as you've taken it. Now you can go further. So you guys, you should be able to resolve these drawings in this way before you go any farther. So Satoko, I like that you're understanding that. All 3 of these are kind of in the same boat. I even like kind of how you're trying to handle this part down here, even though it isn't quite right. Your instinct for simplifying to this kind of basic shadow pattern is the correct one. All right, you guys. So hope that helps. I'm going to put together a slideshow for you guys on Wednesday and do some demos. And anyway, that's it. Talk to you later. Bye bye.